This podcast is powered by the pros at Paschal Air Plumbing and Electric. Arkansas owned, Arkansas operated. GoPaschal.com.
We are live at the National Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, and the president of the Hall of Fame, Josh Rawitch, has taken a seat next to us here. And Josh and I go back, gosh, I think it's been 30 years, Josh, since the last time I was actually here when we were freshmen at Indiana University.
That is wild.
Isn't that?
Oh, man. Pretty cool to have you here in the hall and doing your show from right here in the lobby.
Well,
pretty awesome.
I don't think I would have just been able to show up with the equipment box and set stuff up here and do a show if it wasn't for you, so I really appreciate the opportunity to do this. And just to visit this shrine more than anything, and I've seen it referred to as the spiritual center of baseball. I don't think it could be described any better. It
really can't. I mean, for the longest time, people thought baseball started here, and that's why we're here. But ultimately, whether it started here or anywhere else doesn't matter. It has become, over 85 years, the spiritual home of the game. And we're a block away from Doubleday Field, where every single great player, basically, who's ever played the game, played at some point. And coming off of an incredible weekend here, this is a truly magical place.
Yeah, you look a lot better than somebody that I think would have gotten like almost no sleep and was running around for how many days? 5 or 6 days for induction weekend. I mean, you look like you're well rested. I don't know how you pull it off.
Thanks, Philly. Yeah, I mean, it is such a team effort here. Most people don't realize we've got 100 full-time employees. We've got another 100 front of the house part-time employees, and everybody. A lot of them have to have a second job. That the people that run the library also do transportation, and the people in the mailroom are doing hospitality. It's not what we do, put on events, but I will tell you, you wouldn't know that from watching it. It is 4 or 5 straight days of amazing events here, and for any baseball fan who hasn't been to Cooperstown, you should come at some point, but try to make it to an induction weekend because it's special.
How many people live in Cooperstown?
In the village itself, 1,600. Hard to believe that it's that small.
I love the difference. So you're driving around here and you see there are villages, there are townships. There aren't very many cities.
No, and as a city kid who grew up in L.A., but there's some elements of this that actually remind me of where we went to college in Bloomington. I mean, it is small town America. It is farmland, lots of dairy, but there's also so much more here than any other 1,600-person town in America has because of the place we're at. Whether it's the lake or the hotel or the golf course or the other museums, it's an unbelievable place.
It's like some SEC cities. You know, some of the campuses we go to are like a place like Auburn, which has 100,000 people nearly inside the stadium on game day. 1,600 people live in Cooperstown, but how many were here last weekend for induction?
So we don't have a hard attendance counter, but our estimate was about 28,000 for Sunday's induction. And this museum, I mean, we had, I think, 6,000 people on Saturday alone. And it's a 3-story museum. It's a big place. It's a lot bigger than most people realize. But it was pretty wall-to-wall, and people had just the weather was off the charts. That's always a challenge on induction weekend.
Yeah, you rain out a baseball game, but you don't rain out induction ceremonies.
No, I think the last one was about 30-something years ago, and we've got a plan to move it up to the Opera House up the lake, but we don't want to do that.
You didn't want to do a doubleheader, like postpone it till next year?
Yeah, we actually had to do that in the COVID year with Jeter and
That's right.
Larry Walker, Ted Simmons. That was all pushed back a year, so we have backup plans for our backup plans.
Josh and I started our baseball careers the same year. I was working for a team in Fayetteville, North Carolina. You still may remember seeing me print out 140 letters off a printer in that room in the fraternity house. Josh started interning for the Dodgers, and we've always worked for teams. And doing Razorback games, now I'm still working for teams. You don't work for a team anymore. You work for the Dodgers, you work for the D-backs. This is different, but this is about as deep inside working in baseball as you can get.
It is, and it's in a lot of ways, I don't want to say better. Everything is different, but I mean, it's working in baseball without the games. For most of my career, I was used to basically being at the ballpark until midnight every night and getting up and do it again.
Game notes, post-game notes, interviews,
all
stats,
that stuff. Yeah,
all of it.
All of it. So the idea that I'm not only I get to be around the greatest fraternity in existence, the Hall of Famers, and we get to preserve the history of the game. I mean, there is nothing more special than that. And if you grew up loving the game, there is not a better place to go to the office every day than where I get to walk in.
One of the things that's so interesting about like where you are, where we are right now, and the sport itself, I don't think there's another sport that tries to protect its history and traditions more than the sport of baseball. But it's also a game now that's trying to progress into the future in really, massive ways. Think about the rules changes and all of that. And even just the idea of now Negro League stats being counted as Major League stats. It's just refocusing what you thought Major Leagues were. This is all about history and traditions, but now looking at things in a different way.
Well, and I think what people don't realize is we've actually been doing that since baseball started. I mean, you go up to the second floor here and you see what catcher's equipment would look like in the 1800s. It's not what it looks like today. It happens as an evolution. So, even the major changes, pitch clock or any of the runner on second base and extra innings, it feels jarring at the beginning of it, and then eventually it just becomes part of what baseball is. And if we went back and watched baseball when Babe Ruth was playing, it would not look familiar to us in a lot of ways, and yet for some reason we feel like, we can't change, we've got to stay the same. The reality is we have to change, and the same thing goes for this building, where we have to continue to evolve as a museum and add interactive elements and other cool things that I can see a bunch of young people running around us right now. Like, that's what they want to do. And it's incumbent upon us to make sure they're still having the same good time that you had and I had and my parents had when they came.
Who owns the Hall of Fame?
It is not. It is an independent nonprofit. We actually, a lot of people think we're MLB supported, but we're not. We're just like any other nonprofit people support. We have memberships. We have donors. We obviously, we're sitting here staring at the gift shop, and obviously there's admissions revenue and gift shop revenue, but I answer to a board of 17 people now. Kim Eng just added to it last week.
Yeah.
But the chairman of the board, Jane Forbes Clark, her grandfather started the hall, so she lives here in Cooperstown. She is heavily involved in everything we do, and really the driving force behind what people have seen over the last 20 years as the hall's involved. She along with Rob Manfred, Cal Ripken Jr., and Harvey Schiller were the ones that hired me on the search committee. It's
a big job. You can't ask people like this all the time, something like this, but you're protecting the history and passing these traditions along. That's what I always wanted to do was, even as a broadcaster, just kind of pass those traditions that my father, who's sitting to my right, passed on to me. Your dad did the same thing. Sports writer at the LA Times. That's how you got interested in all of this. It's a big job. Do you ever sit back and think that?
Yeah, you can't help but feel it. There's any number of times a day where something happens and I pinch myself and can't believe I'm doing this. But at the same time, I feel like somehow for 27 years I was working towards something like this without realizing that this was the thing I was working towards. And so I feel very prepared for it. There's no part of it that overwhelms me or scares me, but I'm incredibly humbled by it. And every time I walk into the plaque gallery, I'll kind of pause and take a look around. And a couple days ago, I walked by a plaque of Gabby Hartnett, who was my grandfather's favorite player. And it just struck me as like, man, can you imagine if you could go back and tell that guy what his grandkid would end up doing for a living? Like, it just doesn't even make any sense. And that's what this place does better than anywhere, is connects generations. We're literally looking at it right in front of us right now. Fans here with their kids, with their parents. You're here in the same boat. This place is incredible because it does that.
Gabby Hartnett hit one of the biggest home runs in Cubs history against the Pirates. The Homer and the Gloman, if I remember, that's what it was called.
Well, and I, as I was walking over here, I was telling our director of communications, Craig Muter, about how I knew I could get to you in college by saying Francisco Cabrera's name. As a Pirates fan.
Texters on that screen that you're looking at do the same thing. They send Sid Bream to me every once in a while.
Yeah, sorry, Philly.
Are you allowed to be a fan of the Dodgers while you're working here? Is that still okay?
I'm certainly a fan of the game, of course. But what's interesting is after I left the Dodgers after 15 years there and 35 years of being a Dodger fan, a decade in Arizona made me a Diamondbacks fan.
Yeah.
I still probably follow them more than anyone else, but I follow the game now completely differently. I'm looking for all the historic moments and big play. We're always thinking about what's the next artifact we might try to bring in. I think Freddie Freeman is closing in on a significant milestone for doubles, and if there's a no-hitter tonight, we'll be on the phone to the clubhouse before the end of the game and trying to see if somebody would donate an artifact from that.
So where does all this stuff go? And not all of it can go on display.
No, you're sitting on top of it. We have about 40,000 three-dimensional artifacts, about 3 million documents, hundreds of thousands of photos. It's an incredible place, but about 10% of the actual artifacts are upstairs here in the museum, and 90% we have a vault downstairs that's temperature controlled and humidity controlled and light controlled. Because when we tell players, we might tell, pick a Pirates. Paul Skeens last week when I went and took his cap from him and asked him if he would donate it to the Hall of Fame, we promised him that when his great-grandkids come back 100 years from now, it will look exactly the same. And to do that, of course, we have to make sure that it's protected and we don't just leave it out in the light or let people touch it. There's all sorts of museum rules that we follow in order to make sure that we're preserving the history of the game.
You know, and Josh helped me, I think, change a little bit of my perspective on players that we got texts about earlier today. Pete Rose, Bonds, Sheffield, Palmeiro, all of them, even shoeless Joe Jackson. You know, and the idea that this building houses two things. I don't know if you can view them that they're separate, but they are different. There's a Hall of Fame in which you earn your way in, and there's a museum where the history of the game is told. Is that accurate?
That's perfect, and that's what we tell people when they say, well, how could you have a Hall of Fame without this person or that person? The answer is they're still here, and if you're a fan of these people, you can go and see them on the second floor and the third floor, and we have artifacts from every guy you just mentioned who have been gracious with what they've donated. But ultimately, when it comes to the plaque gallery, it's not our say. We leave it up to the voters to vote, whether it's the baseball writers or once that ballot passes, they get put into another ballot where a committee looks at them. And if 75% of the voters choose for you to be elected, you're elected, and we don't stop that from happening. So,
sorry, you're a baseball fan of not all the teams, just the sport overall. You're still a Hoosier fan, though, right? I mean, you graduated from Indiana. I left after 2 years. He stayed. He was a better student than me. Josh is just smarter than I am. But you got to still be a Hoosiers fan.
I sure do. In fact, I'm going to make my first trip ever this November over Thanksgiving. The Hoosiers are playing in the Bahamas in the basketball tournament, and I will take a trip down there with my family and spend Thanksgiving down there. So, Indiana is responsible for so much of my career. I met my wife there. Ultimately started on my career path with the Dodgers and the IU athletic department and Coach Knight and Coach Yeagley, all these people that had massive impacts on my career. So love that place.
Well, and you can find something in the Bahamas to bring back that's baseball related. I don't know what it is, but I'm sure there's something there.
There actually are, believe it or not, Bahamian big leaguers. And so I don't know if we'll have to dig up their hometowns, but we were a couple years ago, I brought my family down to Aruba Xander Bogaerts has a field kind of in the middle of nowhere, and I said to my son, do you want to go out there and try to find this thing? And so while my wife and daughter were off at the beach, my son and I went and found Xander Bogaerts field where he grew up playing, and we're throwing a ball around there. And when I saw Xander and showed him the picture, he couldn't believe that I went. But several friends of mine said, this is what you do on your vacation? You go to more baseball stuff? I said, once it's in your blood, you cannot get it out.
I know there are listeners right now that are thinking, it's pretty obvious how these two guys became friends immediately.
We're all a little bit sick.
Yeah, just a little bit. But once you find the thing you can do professionally, which adds the sickness in, you're in the golden place.
Yeah, well, it's been awesome watching your career from literally the first time you got behind the mic to where you are sitting now doing live broadcasts from the Hall of Fame. And I'm always keeping track of what you're doing, and I love seeing you do it.
It's funny. It's like you think at one point you'll be able to have a chance to do this. We can do this right now. You and I can do this right now. Look at where we are, man. Look at this. Are you serious?
Not bad for a couple of morons from Indiana, from IU. Yeah, it's pretty special, and that's and the thing really is, as you look around this place, and as we've been talking, there's all these people walking around and enjoying. I mean, this game, it connects everybody. It really it is so special to watch what happens here, and it's been our connection since 1994 or whatever year it was that we.
That's the year.
Yeah, it's 30 years ago. That's nuts.
Josh, appreciate you coming on, and thanks so much for the setup. I'm kind of beside myself about it.
Well, you deserve it. It's awesome having you here, and we'll look forward to getting you back here tomorrow for another show.
Absolutely. It's Josh Rawitch. He's the president of the National Baseball Hall of Fame.
BetOnline is your #1 source for all your betting needs. Get the latest odds, lines, and matchup reports for baseball, boxing, golf, and more. BetOnline continues to be the fastest and easiest way to place your wagers, including live betting and your favorite casino and card games available to play right from your phone. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and get in on the action. Remember to use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online, where the game starts.